Hey guys, it's Brandon here with Origins Film Festival, also the Origins platform. We are honored today to have our guest, Patrick and Martin, who are the co-creators of Midsommar, and Patrick is also the producer. I have Armand here today with Armand Farash, who will be overseeing the entire Zoom call, and he will be our official host. At the end, we'll do a very short Q&A between ourselves. And then after that, we will open it up to everybody else. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. Okay, Armand, you want to go ahead?
Yes, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Patrick Anderson and Martin. Martin, don't hate me. I'm going to butcher your last name. Carl Beast. This is awesome to talk to you folks. Like I said earlier, a lot of folks here are in the horror game, but maybe we have some more general filmmakers and creators. But it's always cool to talk to anybody in the industry regardless of genre. But Origins is horror related, horror focused. So we are going to ask a lot of horror questions. Patrick and Martin, welcome to our program. First off, before we get into the movie, before we get into Midsommar, which I absolutely love, can we talk about you folks as creatives? How'd you get in the game? How'd you get into filmmaking in the first place?
Yeah, sure. So great to be here. Thank you so much, Brandon. And this is going to be very exciting. I mean, I'm Patrick. So I've been in the movie industry for quite some time here in Sweden, coming from distribution, being a festival programmer for many years, and then stepping into production 8 years ago with always the coming from art house films, mainly doing a lot of auteur films, and then but have had a huge interest in horror forever, of course, very much connected to this guy. And then a dream of trying to make an ambitious Swedish horror film, because we don't really have that culture here in Sweden. It's been it's been a struggle to get Midsommar to happen, but then the original idea was to take it through the route of the US. The company that I'm working for here in Sweden, which is called Be Real Films, we're a Swedish independent company, but we do have an office in New York and one in LA, and through that we had the opportunity to get in touch with Ari a very long time ago when we were looking for a screenwriter for our folk horror freak show that is Midsommar, and we ended up collaborating with Ari in the best possible way for many years, and then the film happened. And Martin and me, we know each other since we were 6 years old, and we were constructing very insane ideas already at a very young age. And when we started to dig into the premise of a Swedish folk horror, and knowing we needed a mythology that worked, and something that also worked very, thoroughly with Swedish, both the Swedish background, but also trying to make something new with the folk horror genre from a Scandinavian perspective, we started to collaborate also creatively. So we know each other since we were 6 years old, and that has been a blessing to do something together. And as you can see, Martin is now having his amazing Horge costume as well, since he is actually playing the role of Ulrich in the film. And who are you, Martin?
I'm Ulrich. No. I think you've covered most of it. I haven't been doing films before, so this is my first one. I'm working as a psychologist, and I've been doing some music and poetry earlier. So this is new for me, and I am very grateful for it.
Now let's jump into the movie, because I watched it recently. I know I'm a year late, but I did watch it recently when Brandon asked me to do this interview, and I absolutely love everything about it, from the costumes like you're wearing, to the culture of Midsommar, to the tension, and I love the fact that it didn't rely on jump scares like a lot of horror movies do. It was more psychological. It was more drama driven, more character driven. At the heart of it, it's a breakup story. Wrapped up in horror. So I love everything about it. The visuals were amazing. Can we talk about how you crafted the culture in Midsommar and Hargis?
Yeah, I mean, it started very early on when we crafted the mythology and the philosophy of the Horgast with the intention of really putting it into the context of Hälsingland. And Hälsingland is a part of northern Sweden, which used to be very rich, but also very religious. And they have the most amazing. They both have their own myth in Swedish folklore called which is connected to Horga actually. Which is basically the Swedish equivalent of the legend of the Pied Piper. So it's basically the unprotected village that doesn't manage to protect themselves from evil powers with the symbols of the time. This is back in the early 19th century, and so they get a musician that enters the village and manages to get all the teenagers in a trance, and they dance themselves to be skeletons. So they dance themselves to death up on the mountain of Horga. So we really wanted to sort of dig into both that sort of background part of Swedish real folklore, but also connecting it to the visual world of the mural paintings of Hälsingland. Because these were very rich farmsteads. They were selling a lot of wood and a lot of linen, and they were very religious. So they had the most amazing crafted farmhouses and farmsteads. And in the more festive part of that, they had big ballrooms that were all decorated with amazing folk art. So the inspiration to all the amazing art in the film is coming very much from the actual folk art of from Hälsingland, but making it, telling it another story than the biblical stories that are being told in the real farmsteads, of course, because we wanted to connect this to something different, to the pagan background of our Swedish real midsummer traditions. We have a very infamous, now even more infamous midsummer tradition here in Sweden. I'm sorry to say that this is really this is really messed with the connotation of the loveliness of the midsummer traditions here in Sweden. But we have a Swedish midsummer tradition. It's basically as big as the national holiday, the national day of Sweden, I would say, and it's taking place in connected to the midsummer solstice. And it's an amazing magical night, and kids and families are doing tons of fun stuff and dancing around this maypole and doing all kinds of games and collecting flowers, and then we all get the adults and the teenagers get very, very drunk. But it's definitely connected to an old pagan ceremony, and not many Swedes know how the hows and whys of what we're doing. So that was an important premise when we started to construct the universe and the full basis of the Horgas and the film. So yeah, I guess that summarizes it a bit. And then there are tons and tons of inspirations that we're taking into the context of the Horgas, the visual world of the Horgas, the costumes of the Horgas, the fact that we want them to go from very from very plain white to be even more and more lush and rich towards the end of actually what happens in the film when we have the big fire temple happening. It's actually the midpoint of the midsummer celebration, so it's on the fourth day. Since they have a 9-day festival, this is actually the midpoint. But it's we really wanted to have an arc in the costume design, and and lots of the inspiration is also coming from some sort of idea of making a nightmarish version of the anthroposophical movement, which is kind of big here in Europe, and also an idea of connecting human culture to nature and knowing the balance therein, and how a culture would need to adapt in order to maintain that balance, and that would be the premise of the Horgas and why they need to do what they're doing, and a way for us to be introduced to this cultural world and hopefully falling in love with it. That was also a very important aspect. Someone is running off.
No worries, no worries. Careful, folks. You never know what Coachella is going to turn into in the next few years. No, I'm kidding. Why do you feel that this movie connected to a vast audience? You know, it was more than a cult classic. It's actually like a lot of people loved it from a mainstream perspective as well. What do you think it is that attracted people to the film?
You want to go ahead?
Well, yeah, I think it's. I mean, from a kind of a psychological perspective, at least, I mean, the ambition was to shake people, to rattle people, more or less, and that can be. I mean, that can be a scary thing, but it can also be kind of an exhilarating thing. So hopefully, that can attract viewers that aren't necessarily horror buffs.
Absolutely, and I also think that the way we always approach this and why it's been such a massively amazing collaboration with Ari was that we really wanted to make something different and really have an artistic take on the genre and try to do something new within the folk horror. So that's why, I mean, it's a psychedelic relationship drama in a folk horror framework, so to say. So this has made it. I mean, it's made it quite marketable because it's such a visual feast. So people have been intrigued to see it. But then I think it's a lot of people that actually sees it. It might be their first sort of more artistic film that they see, and it's almost the same way as myself when I saw my first David Lynch film as a kid, and the way you really get thwarted, and you're forced to think differently, and you're forced to approach storytelling in another way, and that's it really connects deeply with people. I've seen that giving the massive fan culture that the film already has, and how important so many people see the film, which is amazing. And it's been, I'd say, it's been mostly evident in the States, but also in Japan and the UK, and somewhat here in Europe, but mainly from people that are not really familiar with European culture in that way. I think the British interest is also connected to the genre of folk horror, because it's originally a very British genre. It's digging deep into the Celtic pagan rituals, mostly and mainly. Before that, those islands were Christian. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's really connected to the UK.
What I really loved about it when I watched it was throughout the movie, from beginning to end, there was this constant unease, So you knew it was a horror movie, even though we started off in the States and we got to know these characters. Everything about it, there's just this constant sense of tension and unease, which I love. So for you folks, I guess this might be a two-parter. For directors and for screenwriters, what do you recommend for writers in as horror storytellers? How do you write horror on a page? Do you keep everything, like, what do you throw on and what do you keep off? And for directors, what do you feel like are the scariest elements in movies, and how do they draw it out from the script?
But I think you always need to in filmmaking, you always need to gather a lot of trust from the financiers and from everyone who's involved in making the film happen, and that trust lies always on the page. You need to know what actually happens in the script, and you need to know what kind of scares you will actually utilize, and how you will linger with them, and what kind of pace you will have, and stuff like that really needs to be clear. But then a lot of the trust is coming connected to the filmmaker, because everyone knew that. We were very lucky to be so far ahead with Midsommar when Hereditary became such a massive hit that it did. And at the time of the actual premiere in Sundance and the breakout of Hereditary, we were ready to go. So that was such a game changer and made us, get all the that kind of trust from the people that wanted to see the film made. So it's very much about. I keep on saying that you have to, as a filmmaker and as a director, you have to really stick to your guns and be true to your filmmaking and know what kind of films you want to make and try to cater to yourself rather than a market, I would say. And then hopefully people at the market that are willing to pay will understand how brilliant you are, so they will give you the trust to make the film you want to make. I mean, I think we have the horror films in general has been in a very interesting sort of transition mode at the moment, going from being way more generic to needed to be more original, needed to have a true voice and a vision that can take it into something else. So this is I mean that makes our times extremely interesting, and not I'd say it's not connected to making a cheap scare. It's connected to trying to make something original and keeping that voice. And with that you have the world as your playground, because the nowadays also the biggest festival are really eager to showcase those films if they are original enough. So try to just be brilliant and patient.
Martin, what were you drinking there? Was that the drink from the movie?
Yep.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. That is amazing.
It's no juice.
Gentlemen, I can talk to you about horror all day long, but we have some questions coming in. So I'm going to call on the audience members. First up, we're going to have Lee, Mackenzie, Bruce, and then Claire. Lee, can you hear us? Let me unmute you really quick. There's two Lees here. 1 second. Let me see. Okay, here's Lee. Hey, Lee, are you there?
I'm here. How's it going?
Good to see you, sir. Well, good to see your name.
Hey, yeah, sir, I don't have the video on. Hey, pleasure to be a part of this thing that you're doing here. This is really wonderful. Love the movie. I'm not necessarily a fan of horror movies in particular. I'm just more of I appreciate just movies that are done very well and artistically. And this one went way above and beyond all expectations that I would have had going into it. In fact, I didn't watch anything about the movie prior to seeing it, which made it even better because I had no idea what was coming, and I loved it. And anyone that I advised this movie, any of my friends that I advised to watch this movie, I just say, don't read anything about it, just watch it and you'll love it. And so, but anyway, so what this movie did for me was, I kind of look at it like this. So, what Jaws did for me about going into the ocean, Midsommar did for me wanting to attend Midsommar in Sweden, basically. It's probably a good analogy. But my question is that in the director's cut, which I watched, which is really, really lovely. If anybody has not seen it, it's something to seek out and check out because it's pretty awesome. There's a scene in there that was completely cut out in the final cut, which was the river ritual scene. And at the end of that scene, there was a little revelation that Danny had imparted on Pell about, them being, like a place where there's a cult, where all these people are part of a cult type religion. And, Pell just kind of blew that off and, sort of didn't really acknowledge that. But to me, I felt like that was kind of a revelation that would have been a great part of the film. And I'm just kind of curious I don't know if you know offhand, but why was that scene cut out? I mean, I know it was long, but I felt like it was a really key component, in my opinion, after watching the regular one, then watching the director's cut.
No, true. I completely agree. It really, we really miss it in the theatrical version, and it also gives you an idea on what happens to Connie, for instance, which is just quite mysterious. I love the way Martin blends into the mural right now. There you go. But to answer your question, we had to try and shorten the film. The first Ari's first cut was almost 4 hours, and we needed to try and get way below that. And then what happened was that there's so much tidying you can do in specific scenes without losing the pace of the film. We had to make that hard compromise of losing the river sequence, because it's basically within the director's cut. I think from the added 24 minutes of what it is, that's 15 minutes of them is the actual river sequence. So it is duration. I'm sorry, that's the boring, but it is.
I can understand that, and that must have been a very tough decision.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, some of the other stuff that was cut out, yeah, maybe here and there. I mean, I just thought that part in particular, I was like, wow, like, my girlfriend and I just watched this and we're like, wow, that was a great part.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing, and it's also the way it's planted to be when the Horgas actually are not going, beyond that limit. They've already experienced at the Stupan, so they are aware that they're capable of doing very horrible stuff, and then it's all theater. It's all just an act. They will not throw this boy into the water. Who would think such a horrible thing, So it's also, it would have given us a lot of new layers to the actual culture of the Horgas as well that we don't have in the theatrical cut. So yeah, I can just everyone just warmly recommend you to see it if you have the chance.
It just kind of, it sort of puts you, from a viewer perspective, it made you question, does everything you're watching up to this point, like what's real, what is not? I mean, I just thought it was beautiful. But yeah, thanks a lot for taking the question. You guys have a great day.
Oh, same to you.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you so much, Lee. Up next with Mackenzie, followed by Bruce. Mackenzie, are you there?
I am. Hi.
Hey, Mackenzie.
Hi. Thank you both again so much for taking this time to talk to us. My name is Mackenzie. I'm a horror producer based in LA, and I'm also a previous film programmer. So, Patrick, this question's for you. I would love to know how film programming impacted your role as a producer, whether it helped you, if it made you more selective. How do you think that impacted you in your role?
It makes, it's both good and bad, because being a festival programmer, as you know, you screen so many films that and as a producer, it's almost good to not know how many films are out there, because you really need to trust the idea and what you're developing and the film that you really want to see come true. So I guess that's sort of coming from festival programming and distribution. It gives you an awareness of the market, which is not solely great, but being a festival programmer, that has been only inspiring, because that has really made me come into a context of filmmakers that love the art of film, and being in that kind of atmospheres and liaisons through all of the years has really sort of just nurtured the way the films that I want to see made, and and my own taste in film, of course. So it's for me, it's been that was my best school. I came from film theory and stepped into I moved to Stockholm to study that, and then I moved into festival programming. So that it was the best way to learn both about the film industry, but also really train your eye in what you like and what you don't like when you see a film, not only when you read a script. Because now as a producer, you're so much in script mode. It's so much a text product. So that I think it's good to have a movie buff eye when you're a producer. So it's only been very, very helpful. Apart from the fact that you understand that you're just one out of hundreds and thousands of films that are being made this year.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Good to meet you too. Up next, we have Bruce, followed by Chloe. Bruce, are you there? Let me unmute you really quick, Bruce. Oh, hey, Bruce, are you there? No worries, we can go back to Bruce later. Let's do Claire next, followed by Jarslow. Claire, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hey.
Hey, Claire.
I'm from London, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, obviously I love the film. And to be honest, if there was like a 4-hour cut, just to me, that's like the only reason to buy a DVD nowadays is because I want to see all the stuff that got cut. But I'd watch that. But yeah, no, my question was about, because I knew that I'd read that Ari Aster had been planning Midsommar quite a while before, but then Hereditary got greenlit first. And then he, that's why you said you were all kind of ready to go. So I was wondering how that kind of impacted your budget, because I can imagine when you first went out and were pitching and sort of fundraising for something like Midsommar, it would have seemed like hugely ambitious. Whereas to me, when I watch Midsommar, that doesn't look like a film that comes from like a first timer. It looks like, it's from an accomplished filmmaker. So I was wondering if after Hereditary had done so well, were you in like a better position to negotiate and get like, like kind of more resources to kind of do the film the way you did it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was Hereditary was a huge game changer for everyone, for Ari, not the least. But we have been on a path and strategical path of trying to get the film made out of funds from Sweden, and out of trying to basically connect European fund money with a US pre-sale. Was the original idea. If you're a producer, you understand what I mean. But it's basically a kind of complex way to fund films. But it was super hard because we knew that when we had the script and we knew how we wanted to do this, there was no cheap version of doing the film, because it would be so compromised. It would not be not original enough, and not the vision that we had. I mean, we were discussing a number of compromises already before that, but it was nothing that no one wanted. So or that anyone wanted. But so we what happened was, when Hereditary was in the final stage of the editing, we were trying to really push the Scandinavian financiers to understand the ambitions of our film and who Ari was. So we actually got a very late, a very secret cut of Hereditary, and actually had Ari to come to Sweden in the midst of the final stages of the editing of Hereditary. So it wasn't the best time for him to go, but we got him to come, and we had tons of really, long sit downs with everyone, but it just didn't fly, even though they saw Hereditary and they couldn't get a grasp of what kind of film we wanted to make. So then Sundance happened, and the film just blew up and became such a huge critical hit, but also the expectations for the commercial release was just skyrocketed, and it became basically, as you guys remember, the expected indie hit in the horror genre of that year. And coming from the year of Get Out, everyone was really expecting this to be such a massive smash hit. So I got a call from A24 who had been tracking the film for a long time, of course, because they knew Ari and they knew of our film, and they had read the script, and we were discussing with them, for a long time, and they offered to step in to fully finance, and that made us able to make the full vision of the film. The only compromise that we did make, I see that this is a question coming up, but it was the fact that we needed to shoot the film not in Sweden. We needed to shoot and film in Hungary. It's connected to budget. It's connected to tax breaks, tax credits that we don't have in Sweden, but it's mainly connecting to the fact that we needed to have so much daylight, and so that we needed a weather that was not changing every 10 minutes as it's doing in Sweden. and it's raining all the time, or it's it's going from sun to rain to cloudy. And then we knew we would have restraints in terms of infrastructure and the way we wanted to set fire on stuff like that. So it was just easier to make the film in Hungary, and we would not have been able to do it in Sweden, not at all.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. Greetings from London. I'm gonna ask Bruce a question on his behalf because I don't think we can find him right now. Bruce asks, I'm struck that the film, in my opinion, does not see the Harga as a cult, but a valid religion and belief system. How do you feel that many think of it as a cult?
Well, I'm not hurt by it, but I wouldn't see it as a cult, because I think cults have leaders, and cults are kind of temporary constructs, while this is supposed to have been existing for longer than the Swedish nation. So I see it more as a clan, perhaps. But, well, whatever suits you.
Yeah, fair enough. We're going to have Sangita next. I think you answered Jaroslav's question about shooting in Hungary. So we're going to go with Sangita next.
Hi, greetings from San Francisco. Thank you so much for putting on this event. Stuff like this is really the bright spots in quarantine, for sure. So thank you for doing it. My question was about, I guess, Josh's character and kind of what he seems to represent throughout the movie. Like, I remember I found it really interesting when I was watching that, like, something horrible would happen and the audience would think it was horrible and we'd all gasp. And Danny, who I feel like is the closest to the audience in her feelings, is also horrified. And then Josh and Christian and maybe like Mark too are all like, well, from an academic sense, it's okay, and like they're their own culture and we have to respect it and we need to be nice about it, even if it's horrifying. And I kind of made connections between that and what I see going on a lot in the world now. Like, people don't understand each other's cultures. So even if something horrifying is happening, we leave it alone because we're like, they're on the other side of the world. I mean, they probably know what they're doing. And I was just wondering if that was on your mind when you were making the movie, because it kind of seems to be like going on throughout, like scarier and scarier things happen and Danny's the only one that gets it.
Yeah.
Or if this is just like an audience interpretation.
I think it's both. I mean, a film is always interpreted by the contemporary space that it's actually being released in. But definitely, the construct of having Josh and Christian and Pelle, for that matter, and Mark to be anthropology students, that was the way that sort of their interest, the academic interest, would stand in the way of better judgment of just getting the hell out of there.
And also the competition.
Exactly, and the competition. But the to your question, I think definitely what we're playing a lot with is aesthetically and as an idea is national romanticism, which is it's coming more and more in sort of the on the global all over the world, connected to political movements and just people trying to understand old traditions and not really connecting that they might be that they themselves might be imported from something else, and it's just a construction and the kind of way that works. It was also very interested in the contemporary political space to play with that, and which was also the reason why the folk horror films got so celebrated and big in the 60s. So I think we're at a time which is kind of similar as the late 60s, I would say, and the global turmoil and people looking back to find some sort of solace in old traditions and stepping your feet deeper into your own soil. So to make that into a horror was just a given. And then I mean, looking at other cultures and not sort of understand that you should get out rather than look closer. It's I'd say, I mean, we really want to, I'd say, encourage people to be curious and to be open.
Yeah, of course.
Rather than just judging people and think that they will be, thrown off cliffs and sacrificed. So that's hopefully not discouraging anthropology students to go and study interesting Indian tribes all over the world, even though they might get assassinated.
Yeah, but that's horror for us in a way, to take something quite beautiful and pervert it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
It's supposed to hurt,
Thank you, Sangeeta. Good to meet you. Thanks for being here. Up next, we have Cameron. His microphone's not working, so I'm going to ask on his behalf. This is more of a general filmmaker question. How should a student filmmaker finance their first film for a festival? Any advice for him?
Where is he? He, she?
Not quite sure.
I mean, it's so different, depending on where in the world you are. So some film schools have their own system of making of financing the films connected to different funds. I know they have that in Germany. We have that in Sweden. But in the States, I don't really know. I think maybe you need to either be at a film school that have resources or find yourself a patrons of the art that will help you.
And Cameron says he's from Atlanta.
LA, okay, yeah. Atlanta.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure how you do it specifically there. In this, I can't really say.
Gotcha, no worries. And Mark, I just had a fun question. The artwork behind you obviously is in the movie, if you saw the ending. But the specific drawing behind you, was that based on any mythology outside of the movie?
No, not really. I mean, the symbol of people dressing up in bears,
yeah,
that is connected to old pagan traditions in Sweden. I mean, it's an old Viking image.
The berserker.
The berserker, which is basically a warrior dressed in a bear suit. So it's also connected to the Norse god of Odin and stuff like that. Stuff that is, enriched in the mythology of the Horgast, but never outspoken. But you can really see all of those elements. And the idea was to basically see that this has been sort of progressed out of an old, or even beyond the Norse traditions. But it's something we very intently wanted to have as a part of our world, to play with the Scandinavian pagan background, but also not very outspokenly in the film in terms of specific Norse gods and stuff like that. I think it's only at one point where Odd is talking about Ymir. Yeah, that's the only sort of only hint you have to the Norse background of the Horgast. Otherwise, you can't see anything.
And probably Odd at that moment is just bullshitting them.
Exactly, it's all a theater.
Now here's another fun one, and this is for me actually. We take something like a bear skin, right? You see it on script and go, okay, we can make it happen. We can get bear skin, whether it's fake or real. Was there anything on the script that you just couldn't pull off? You look at it and go, I don't think we can do that.
Yeah,
everything, but we had to do it.
But there were things around concerning an animal sacrifice, for instance.
Exactly. I mean, and we had to rewrite the animal sacrifice because.
And now it's not in the movie at all.
No, but it's very hard to have animals in films, as we all know.
That's true. That's very true. What was the most satisfying scene to shoot when you saw it on the big screen?
Satisfying scene?
Satisfying scene, yeah. Like, oh, we made it happen. That was great.
Yeah, I think that question should go to Martin, since he was in front of the camera so much. What was most satisfying?
Well, to be a part of, I think it was when we finally was done with the mirror dinner table thing. That was such a huge relief, because that was awful. We sat in almost 40 degrees Celsius with the sun in our eyes and rotten food all over the place for 3 days, puking over our shoulders. So it was kind of disgusting. But I think from like a visual standpoint, I love the scene where the women support Danny and they have their group crying thing. I think that it always tears me up.
Love that scene, absolutely. We're actually going to bring it back to Lee, and then Bruce is back on here. His audio is working. So let's go back to Lee, followed by Bruce. No, Lee, I can ask a question for you actually. What was the pressure like with filming almost until it was released? I know the turnaround was pretty small. So what was pressure like with filming until it was released?
Filming and doing all the post, you mean?
Yes.
I mean, it was crazy because the original plans was to release the film in August, and then it got pushed up to June because it was a sweet spot for the release, I assume, but also since it's closer to actual Midsommar, so it made all the sense. But that really put a lot of pressure on reaching the end of the edit and making the final film, because the first press screening we had, which was 2 weeks before the premiere, was in New York at the Alamo Drafthouse, and that was a cut that Ari was still working on 2 weeks before the premiere. So I mean, sometimes it's good to not wait too long, because just get it out there, and see what people think. But it's also kind of crazy to not have any breathing space between locking a film and presenting it to the market the way this was presented. But it was really exciting, I must say.
Now, Bruce was here earlier, but we actually asked this question on his behalf, but he hopped out in an accident. But he's back on here, so we're gonna bring back Bruce to ask this question.
All right, can you hear me now? Am I coming through?
Yeah.
Hey,
Christopher, love it.
Hey guys, it's so awesome we'll do this. First of all, this movie was my favorite movie last year, bar none. Love it. And so much so that my kid and I had to make the bear in a cage just to let you know.
Oh, nice. You made it yourself?
We had to. You couldn't get it from A24. So that was our little project. He didn't.
I love that song as well. Did you hear it?
Yes. It's a bear. It's a bear.
It's a bear.
That's Saturday Night Live.
So since you kind of answered my question already, I guess I'll take it another way. I think that this movie, from my perspective, is really a mirror on the people that come to it. Like the way they react to it really depends on kind of what they bring to it in a lot of ways. And hopefully they maybe learn a little something about themselves, if that's the goal. That being said, I feel like you have some very, very, very hardcore fans for this movie in a very short period of time. So what is one of the more unusual fan experiences that you guys have had after the opening and success of Midsommar?
Well, the fan stuff that I've seen have been mostly just following the hashtag of Midsommar on social medias, and then you can basically see a lot of the fan art and a lot of the the cosplays and the Horga traditions coming up. And I think some of the craziest ones that I've seen that I just love was they had made a sieve piñata that they were hitting with the big mallet. Yeah. And that was actually happening like the opening weekend in LA. So I don't know if it was a part of the marketing stunt or whatever it was, but I don't think so, because I would have heard about it. And but I loved that. I also loved the way that sort of dressing up as the May Queen and boyfriend in a bear suit, that became like the Halloween go-to costume thing to do, was so amazing. But all the sort of the crowning of that one was the fact that I got an email from the actual the library of the Academy, motion pictures that had their own Halloween party, and the winning couple was actually dressed as Danny and Christian. So I mean, it just says so much about how big this film has become, and it's so much fun to also chase after sort of the unofficial merchandise that is out there, and all the lovely pins and all the inspiration they have from the mural paintings. And
did it surprise you? Did it surprise you to have that level of iconic response like within a year? It's just coming up on a year, and it's become an iconic movie to people.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, this kind of impact, I don't think anyone could have predicted for the film. It's just amazing. I mean, it's hit something in popular culture and in the contemporary world we're in. And I can't really make the analysis of why, but it's amazing.
People are feeling held. I think that's what it is, right?
And I'm extremly grateful that we were able to make this happen in 2019 and not 2020, because we would have just postponed the film to infinity. So, thank
you so much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucifer.
Thank you so much, Lucifer. We're gonna bring back to Claire. Claire wants to know, because I know a lot of us, not to say a lot of, but I think a good chunk, maybe 30 minutes was cut from the original, right? So how many days did it actually take to film the entire movie?
60 or something?
No, it's actually 44 days. I think it was, or maybe 46. It was 40 days shooting in Hungary, but it was and then it was some extra shooting days in the States. So it was a short amount of time, but we were in Hungary for a long time.
Yeah.
During all the pre-production and the building of the village and everything. So.
And Aaron wants to know, will the longer cut be made available in the US?
I think it is already. I think you can see the director's cut on most like streamers where you can rent it, iTunes nonetheless, I think.
So gentlemen, we're nearing the end of the conversation, but I want to know, before we go, if you can say, obviously we're all quarantined, so in terms of production, not much going on, but are you developing anything that you can talk about?
I'm sorry, can you take that again?
Are you developing anything that you can talk about while you're quarantined?
Well, we are developing stuff. We can't really talk about it, but it's gonna be more horror.
Oh yes,
and it's gonna be more Swedish stuff. So yeah.
You had me at horror. You had me at Swedish. We're actually gonna bring it back to Jaroslaw, then Mackenzie. So Jaroslaw, are you there? Hopefully I'm saying it right. Jaroslaw.
No microphone for Jaroslav.
Oh no microphone. Okay. Jaroslaw asks, it's a long one. If I can find it. The murals, I first saw them in Seventh Seal and was amazed at how comic book they look, or they are. And I love how they are so important in Midsommar. Did Ragnar Persson Ari Aster's choice or yours, or is there story behind him?
It's actually our production designer's choice.
Yeah, it's there was a Swedish production designer on this film called Henrik Svensson, who's an old friend of mine, and he was a very early part of the project and the development of the entire film, and specifically the artistic world. But the idea of using the murals, the Hälsinge murals from Hälsingland, that was it. That was in the concept that we developed. So the actual murals that you see are more inspired by those very specific folk art of Hälsingland, and the ones in Seven Seal aren't that geographically specific. So Ragnar Persson, who's an artist here in Sweden, he made his interpretation of the imagery and the style of the murals up in Hälsingland to develop what's in the film. So it was very it was a connection made from Henrik, and then of course spitballed between everyone. But and Ari just loved him. So he's a very Swedish component in the film, a very important Swedish component.
Thank you so much for asking, Jaroslav. Up next, we're going to bring it back to Mackenzie and then have Davis on here. So Mackenzie, you're up.
Hi again. So I wanted to also ask a question specifically related to Midsommar, and I'm really interested in how Ari Aster explores female characters within his films. I find it really interesting how he adds nuance to sort of the female experience within his film. So I was curious if there was a symbolic reason that the protagonist of Midsommar ended up being a woman, and in the concept of the other, with sort of the paganist sense and the cult-like sense, exploring the sexual experience of women in this cult. If there was more of a conscious choice to make the protagonist a woman in relation to the other.
Yeah, that was planned from the very start, I'd say. Much because we haven't seen that as much. So we find that area isn't that explored, and also because, I mean, from the beginning it was you and me, and we didn't want it to be a boys' club.
Exactly. No, you
Am I fading out?
You're fading out. Yeah, exactly, and I agree that Ari's writing in terms of female characters are really quite amazing, and you can see it already in the script of Hereditary, and how deep he goes into his character work, and as he was coming to into the world of Midsommar, he was coming from a really tough breakup. I mean, this is private things for him, but I know he's mentioned this in other interviews, so it's no secret. So he was basically applying his experience of being on the losing end of a relationship to the character of Danny in this film, and going all the way with that, and having a protagonist who we are experiencing the film, and it's almost like the betrachter, the
beholder.
It's I mean it's the beholder of the whole film. I mean it's the one who gets the one who we connect with immediately in the film through the trauma of the what happens to her family. And her sister, and then as we come to Sweden, and the very complicated relationship she has with Christian, she is the one that goes on a bad trip. She's the one that we start to have sort of the psychedelic viewpoint from on everything that is actually happening. She is the one that basically witnesses everything, and then as the film becomes even more, when the film becomes psychedelic in itself, we are just hopefully then connected to Danny as an audience, and will experience what she is experiencing. So that, I think that was the whole artistic idea of having this character sort of lead us all the way through it. And then it's definitely more interesting to have a female protagonist coming into this this pagan, there's no leader, there's no real rules. They try to be, they try to be very much defined by nature, and which makes it hopefully you would be more open if, as an outsider, if you're Danny at least. I mean, if you come from that background, but also I think it's connected to her being female rather than in the boys' club. So that we have so many of.
Yeah, it feels a little like it's more of an egalitarian society with sort of feminine undertones. I wondered if, related to my question with like the concept of mother, maiden, crone, if that was something that you considered, if you're even familiar with that concept, if that was something where you wanted to embed feminine energy within this structure in general.
Now you have to educate me.
The mother maiden crown.
Yeah, it's basically the concept of like 3 stages of feminine roles in the sense of a greater historical concept. So sometimes it comes through in religion, it comes through in more medieval type storytelling, but it's also has a history with a Native American background. But I know sometimes it's sort of a concept in exploring female energy, and I was curious if that was a concept that was brought to the table or if it came out organically.
Organically.
Obviously, not academically, at least.
No.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was really interesting to hear the background of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mackenzie. We're going to do Davis, Alana, then bring it back to Lee, Claire, and Cameron. Davis, are you there?
Yeah.
Hey,
Thanks.
Davis.
Hey, thanks for being here, guys. I know you talked about like when you were trying to get Midsommar started, and you showed producers like a rough cut of Hereditary, and you talked about that, and also like sticking to your guns and with your vision. I was just curious, are there any ways that you would love to see proofs of concept other than just in the script format, because I imagine as a producer or anyone in the industry, there's a lot of scripts, there's a lot of concept trailers, anything like either a different medium or just different ways within the mediums to set the script apart, basically.
No, I think it's always helpful to have proof of concepts, I would say. But it all depends on what you can read out of the script. But I don't know if it's a straight answer to your question, but I definitely think a proof of concept helps to sort of paint the visual picture, at least, of what's expected out of the read. It's something we work with all the time when we work on new ideas. We try to make sure to have something that gives it a visual presentation as well, rather than just having the script format, because it's sometimes you need that help, or you always need that help. Even how experienced you might be as a financier, you can't get your head around how this film will actually look unless you present it to them.
Gotcha.
And it was super helpful with Midsommar because we, of course, had our production designer with us so early, and he did such an amazing work very early on to sort of get all of our crazy ideas down on paper, and then he made just a Bible of everything, of the entire film. So we basically just showed everyone this Bible, and they would understand the film we wanted to make. But then they were still hesitant, which in Sweden, which is only connected to our lack of culture of dealing with horror films. So they couldn't really put it into context and understand what we wanted to make. So I guess we were bad at pitching it.
You're probably way better than me. So, but thank you. That really does help. Especially mentioning it as a Bible to have, that's really cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Davis. Gentlemen, we have a few more. We're going to go ahead and do Alana next, and then bring it back to Lee. And then Cameron and Henry, I'm going to ask their question, a combined question, if you will. So we're going to do Alana next. 1 second here. Hey, Alana, are you there?
Does my microphone work?
There we go. Yes.
Okay. I'm so sorry. I didn't know I had a working microphone.
See you. You're good.
Okay. I just was wondering if, I know Pele obviously handpicked Danny to be the May Queen. So I was wondering if he also had a hand in what happened to her parents at the beginning. Like, was it that predetermined that she was going to be part of this?
I love that question.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Martin?
Well, it wouldn't surprise me.
I don't think we're going to answer that question.
I didn't think you would.
I love that question.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lana. We're gonna combine Cameron and Henry's question. It's two-parter. Hopefully, you don't mind that. What is your opinion on the future creative needs of the horror genre overall in 2021 after COVID? But also, how will COVID impact low-budget horror productions?
I can only say that from the Swedish perspective in terms of the second part of the question, because we're still shooting here. I mean, we're currently very unwanted in the rest of the world if you're Swedish, because we had a different COVID strategy. We didn't quarantine. Basically, we were just recommended to avoid people, and we're pretty good at that.
Yeah.
So it was a good strategy. But then, that means that we are still shooting both films and TV series here. We're not shooting abroad, so projects that would have needed, other locations than Swedish will have been postponed. And I think the same goes for lots of shoots in the States, that they're basically being postponed. The shoots are, though, heavily regulated right now, so you have to wear masks, you have to be a maximum of 50 people. There's a lot of dressing up team members as extras for specific scenes when you need to have more people and stuff like that. But it's actually working out quite fine, and the industry here in Sweden hasn't been on a standstill. It's been ongoing, which has been good. And then everyone is very no one knows what's going to happen to theaters and when they will reopen, and will people be, will they be back into theaters, and will they be watching cinema in the way they did before COVID-19, or at least how long will it take for everyone to get back to normal? And I guess time will tell. And I don't think hopefully horror films will not be too affected, because there's still a huge market also in the smaller art house cinemas that are still open for business, and also among the streamers that they really love it. So as long as the sort of festivals and streamers are ongoing, I think it's a great way to get great low budget horrors out. But I think it's a huge question marks in terms of the bigger scales, and when actually the market will be back to normal. I have no idea. I just know the Swedish cinemas are connected to the American market, of course, because everyone is waiting for Hollywood strategy. So when Hollywood is back to normal, Sweden will adapt quite soon, I think. So hopefully by the Christopher Nolan film, something will happen at least. Tenet or what's
Tenet, yeah, Tenet. Very good. Thank you so much, gentlemen. We're gonna go ahead and do Lee to wrap things up. So Lee, you want to ask the last question?
Hello.
There we go.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Alana kind of stole my thunder about that question with the suicides, possible murder situation with the parents and the sister. Thanks for leaving us guessing on that one. We really appreciate it. But I did have another question. So in the euthanasia scene, what lore or what culture or where did you guys pull that one from? Just out of curiosity, because that's that scene is absolutely one of the most fascinating scenes in the film.
It's Swedish.
Is that right?
Yeah, it is Swedish. I mean, it's here. It's some people are calling it a myth.
Most people
are calling it a myth, but it's a myth that has become so real that people are really using it in expressions. Especially now in COVID-19, I know that the Swedish strategy of trying to maintain social distancing but still go basically, by as normal in the rest of your life, that has been the equivalent of ättestupan, where you're just pushing the risk group off the edge of the cliff, and the ones who survive, they survive. So it's been liknelse. Yeah, an allegory for the way Swedes deal with our elders for a long time. But it's coming from Swedish myth.
And it's also kind of a pun on the Swedish suicide statistics.
True.
Which are supposedly high. They aren't, but well, according to myth, they are.
Cool. No, this is great. Thanks again, guys. Have a great day, and see you soon, hopefully.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lee. Thank you so much for your question, Lee. Also, folks, don't forget when we finish the Q&A with Patrick and Martin, stick around on Zoom for more networking because we have folks from all over the world here for this interview. So please stick around for networking with each other. Gentlemen,